So, was the NFL racist against Shedeur Sanders? Coming right up. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Common Sense, Logic, and Reason. And as always, I want to say thank y'all for joining me today. So as we know, the NFL, the 2024 NFL draft has come and went, and I would say largely it was a great success for the NFL. I mean, the draft had more viewership in total than all of NBA playoff. So I would say it's definitely successful in the NBA. I mean, the NFL definitely knows what they're doing with the NFL draft, taking it prime time. But I think by now everybody know that Shedeur Sanders fell to the 5th round when he was expected to go in the 1st round. And I know everybody kept linking him to the Saints, and I'm like, we have our future already in the building. That being Spencer Rattler, to me anyway. But they were all of the usual suspects, all of the black victims, the people who hype race all the damn time. Well, they were crying racist about this. This is racism. And I asked the question, well, wait a minute, you telling me that it was racism that Shedeur Sanders fell to the 5th round. However, 26 out of the 32 first round draft choices were black. So they were racist against Shedeur Sanders, but they weren't racist against these other black players in the 1st round. And not to mention all the other black players in all the other rounds that were drafted before the 5th round, or at least before Shedur. You telling me that the NFL was racist against them as well? That's idiotic. Of course, the black victims, they have a whole multitude of excuses to try to excuse that away. They were saying, they would try to say, well, the NFL doesn't want a black man with a strong father, that being Deion Sanders. Well, okay, so you telling me that in the history of the NFL, there's never been any black players with strong fathers? Hell, what about this year's draft? You telling me that all the black players drafted, none of them had strong fathers? Now, I know that we have a higher rate of single-parent households with our fathers amongst blacks, but you telling me that all the other players that were drafted in the league, they didn't have fathers? How do you know that? If their fathers were quote-unquote strong or not? Then they were saying, well, they don't want a black man with confidence. Once again, you telling me that in the history of the NFL, Shedeur Sanders is the only black player with confidence? You telling me that Deion Sanders, when he was drafted in the 1st round, he didn't have confidence, and that's why they drafted him in the 1st round? All the other black players drafted in the 1st round, they didn't have confidence. And then they started saying, well, this is buck breaking. I'm honestly not going to even try to address that jackassery. But one of the things that you heard the most is that the NFL is trying to send a message to the other slaves. Well, first of all, NFL players are not slaves. They're far from slaves. Anybody who say that NFL players are slaves are idiots. The slaves do not have the free will decision to participate in the game, a game in which they're handsomely rewarded for playing. Slaves don't do that. So that's a bunch of BS. But what exactly is this message then? Sending a message to of what and to who? What is this message that they're trying to send to other black players? Nothing. That's just idiotic nonsense. Okay? And basically the truth, if you want to be honest, there's obvious truth that many people have spoken on and said why Shedeur Sanders fell to the 5th round. The number one thing that everybody was saying is basically arrogance. He came into this draft with a whole lot of arrogance. He came in with this my team, my choice attitude. And this is kind of the thing that we saw with Eli Manning, how, his father, Archie Manning, basically came in and said that he don't want his son playing for a loser. So they say that he was going to hold out if he goes to a team that he didn't want his son to play for. And inevitably, Eli was drafted by the Chargers. and traded to the Giants. So this is the attitude that he came into the league with. Also, I hear that his interviews were horrible. He did a horrible job in interviews, or he shooed off teams that supposedly he didn't want to consider worthy. And so you telling me that you shoo off the interview process, which is very important. I mean, there have been a lot of teams who didn't look at a player and a player wasn't on their radar, but after the interview, they fell in love with the player and that became their guy. Also, there have been teams that obviously they basically had interest in the player, but they lost interest after the interview. That's as important. Okay, the interview with NFL and the draft process is just as important as anyone who interviewed for any other job out here. And especially for a quarterback, which is considered the most important position of any team, all of team sports. And you fail your interview process and you wonder why nobody wanted to draft him. And then I would say another issue was Deion. They say he had a strong father. Maybe Deion was too damn strong then. Again, I understand that you want to be with your son and you want to participate in the process, but you got to step back and let your son come to the forefront. And Deion was just too far in the forefront with this, this my team, my attitude, my choice attitude nonsense. And people didn't want to deal with that nonsense no more than I guarantee you the Chargers didn't want to have to deal with the nonsense with Eli Manning, that they have to trade him away in order for him to play. People don't want to deal with that foolishness. So this is why Shedeur Sanders dropped. Not because of racism, not because somebody trying to damn bug break somebody. I can't believe they still throwing this bug breaking bullshit around. What black folks do, black victims do. It was because of his attitude and how he approached the draft in the game, and nobody wants to deal with that. That's not something you want in a leader, and the quarterback is the team leader. Anyway, like I said, that's my 2 cents on this. It was not racism, it was his attitude. And as always, until next time.